What's up guys, just wanted to do some benchmarking of Far Cry 6 today with the RX 6700 XT, mainly because I've seen a bunch of videos and questions regarding the VRAM usage, and because I run an OSD, like apparently there were some issues with the in-game VRAM calculator, like the in-game estimate. There were some people saying that 10 gigs too little for the HD texture pack at ultra-wide 1440p. Definitely at 4K there may be issues, but yeah, I just want to share the VRAM usage with ultra settings, ultra wide 1440p. And, you can just see here with DXR on, and then we'll do one with DXR off. And I'm also going to keep FSR, even though it doesn't make sense not to use it, I'll do one run at the very start with FSR off, just so you can see the gains from FSR as well. Okay, so we'll go full ultra 3440 by 1440, one run. And you can just see what the VRAM usage is like in the benchmark, and I'm also going to do some gaming at the end of the benchmarking, but I'm going to benchmark a few different ranges of settings first to see what kind of performance we can hit. Okay, so yeah, sit back and enjoy. I will timestamp the video down at the bottom so you can skip to what's relevant for your resolution, because I'm also going to go into 1440p and maybe not 1080p, because I think that's overkill, especially for this configuration. Okay, cheers guys.
This is a reminder that curfew will be in effect tonight. It is strongly urged that you respect this safety measure established by your government.
Alrighty, so yeah, you can see there that at the very end there was some dips under 60. Not a big deal, but it is at the higher zoom out, like when it was going above the little town. So we'll see if turning on FSR helps to eliminate that, but I'm going to leave DXR on at first, even though, in my opinion, it's not worth running DXR, no matter what your setup is, just because the visual difference with the, fake reflections or whatever you want to call them, I find it looks fine, and it's hard to notice when you're actually playing and worrying about enemies and stuff. You don't stop and look at the ground puddles. But anyway, personal preference, so I'm going to include DXR with the first FSR enabled run, just so the people who do want to run DXR can at least see what kind of performance to expect, and then we'll see the gain of disabling DXR. But first, yeah, FSR and ultra quality it's very subtle. The image quality difference, like you don't lose much image quality, but going down to quality, it's just not worth it, at least with this configuration, unless maybe you're playing at 4K. But ultra quality already gives a great gain. So yeah, that's the only setting we're changing. Everything else is still on ultra. HD texture packs enabled. And yeah, hopefully you can at least get that VRAM metric as well, not just whatever the in-game estimate's telling you. And we're leaving CAS on and all that stuff. Okay. Also, if you notice, my 0.1% low is dipping lower than the in-game estimate, the in-game minimum. It's because that is an average minimum. It's not a 1% low or 0.1, and I don't show my minimums in my benchmark tool because the minimum is kind of misleading. It's not really showing you the 1% lows that might lead to actual stuttery gameplay. And 0.1 is, 0.1 is like unnoticeable, but still the lowest of the 1%, the 0.1%, lowest of 1. But anyway, just to give you that reference, if you're looking at the 0.1 and the 1, they should be lower than the minimum. It's fairly normal. So we can see with FSR on, we definitely got a higher, and I can actually show the previous run by hitting F. So as you can see, our max went up to 97. So this is FSR, and this is without FSR. So native, average FPS was 65. This is what's more important. Average was 65, and that went up by 10 FPS by enabling FSR quality. And I guess the minimum is about the same. I think the 1% were slightly lower with FSR, maybe because it's pushing a higher maximum. If you cap the frame rate, when you have higher maximums, it'll improve the 1% most because you leave headroom on the GPU. But when your system is pushing max frames and it's higher than the previous max, you're actually using more of your CPU. When you think about it, your CPU is also pushing more frames. The GPU can be at 99% regardless, but you're using up more CPU resources to push 97, and that's why you end up with larger 1% load dips because you're pushing a higher maximum. So that's just a reference. I will do some FPS cap runs too, just to show you that difference at the very end of all of this testing, because I do want to show people why an FPS cap can make a difference. Even in the in-game benchmark, it'll help with the dip. There's a dip that happens at a certain spot every time. You know, like 13 or 14 seconds in, you can see here, that dip's the same, but that dip is bigger when you have a higher maximum. So I see with the maximum at 97, it makes the dip look bigger because it's coming from a higher, you know, it's coming from all the way up here, it's going, and it tanks all the way down at that spot. And while if you're at a lower maximum of 79, the dip down to 55 or whatever it is, or that's actually an average, but the dip down to like just above 60 is, must be the average graph, is not as noticeable because the max isn't as high. So when you cap it to like 90, obviously that dip's going to be smaller, less noticeable. Anyway, so this is the FSR performance, and now we're going to disable DXR, just to show you how much higher we get. And we're only going to have the previous run to compare to. So this is going to be FSR with DXR enabled, this one. And then we're going to compare it to FSR again, exact same ultra quality with DXR disabled. Okay? So back in the settings, and we go to advanced and not advanced, quality, watermark quality, and I'm just going to disable these two. It looks noticeable in the in here, like if I actually in the preview image, but in game you don't notice it. So it's like a quite different. You can see like the building is getting, you know, done more accurately, but the pole is still there. The kind of like the reflection is just off angle a bit more, and you're just getting a bit of color, but you're not getting like the full perfect, you know, building as with DXR. But still, and this is subtle. It just kind of enhances certain spots, but for me, that's not a big deal. Like you have to be really paying attention to those minute shadow details to even notice it while you're actually playing, looking for items and stuff. So anyway, that's the main one. We're turning the DXR stuff off, and we're going to see what that does.
Inhabitants of Concepcion, this is a reminder that curfew will be in effect tonight. It is strongly urged that you respect these safety measures established by your government.
So there we go. We still had that big dip at the end of the run when it zooms out. That is, I think, to do with the overall detail and streaming bandwidth of the GDDR6. It's not 6x, so the bandwidth for the VRAM and the RAM, the texture swap or the streaming textures at the larger view distance is a little bit slower, so there is more dips. And I noticed when I adjust the settings, you know, you tweak optimal values, you don't get massive FPS dips like this when you tweak the graphical settings for more optimized settings, I would say. You get like a minimal quality loss, but as you can see here, we were at 75, 97, 55, and disabling the XR brings us up to 82, a higher maximum, and then a lower minimum. And again, like I mentioned before, higher maximums will hit your minimum because the CPU or other resources in the system, bandwidth, whatever it may be, the VRAM, your DDR, swapping data or pushing data through the RAM from the CPU and the GPU, higher FPS will cause higher usage, and that's where I think the minimums get hit. But in saying that, having a higher max means that when you cap the FPS, you'll also end up with better overall frame rate. Alrighty, so now I'll move into 1440p. I will do a native run of 1440p because this benchmark does not take that long to run. So first I will disable FSR, and we'll go back in here, turn DXR back on, and the monitor has to be set to 16:9, 1440p. Apply those changes, and rerun the benchmark. So yeah, for everyone else. And do keep in mind as well that there is a slight performance hit, frame rate hit because of relive recording. There is a slight hit, but for me, it didn't seem to matter. Like when I play off recording, it was really close actually to what I was seeing in benchmarks and relive testing. So when I upload some actual gameplay footage, that's kind of like basically the real world performance is very close because it's such a small difference from real life. But what's interesting is look at that VRAM usage, even at 1440p with the Ultra HD texture pack. And I'm not disabling the texture pack if I can avoid it, unless it's stuttering, but it seems to be running fairly well. So yeah, that was native 1440p without FSR, and the only complaint would be that still fairly low minimum, which led to lower 1% lows as well. So even if we just go by the minimum, it's under 60, and ideally you want 60 plus, even if it is a single player, it does have cooling, but yeah. And compare this to 3440 by 1440 with DXR disabled, we're getting better performance at ultra wide until I enable FSR again. Okay. So now we're going to do 1440p with FSR. That's all I need to make. Actually, I don't have to restart the whole game to get accurate data. It's only when you change the actual preset settings that you really need to restart.
A reminder that curfew will be in effect tonight. It is strongly urged that you respect these safety measures established by your government.
Alrighty, and you can see our max went up again just like before, our average went up, and our minimum only improved by 1 according to the the benchmark itself. I think our 1% lows did improve as well. But as you can see, 1440p does run fairly well, even with the HD texture pack. And yeah, 72 with FSR, 72 average, 104 max, 50 minimum. And now we're going to go out and disable DXR, because I did re-enable DXR for the native run, and it's still enabled. So this will be more like close to optimal settings, but like for 1440p, you'd probably be fine with just this. FSR ultra quality and disabling DXR and leaving everything else ultra, and you'd be fine. Maybe run an FPS cap to bring up that minimum, but I'm just going to show you what this looks like for performance and VRAM usage.
Inhabitants of Concepcion, this is a reminder that curfew will be in effect tonight. It is strongly urged that you respect this safety measure established by your government.
Alrighty, so you can see that difference there. Disabling DXR actually brought us from 72 to 80 average. And we got a 14 FPS gain on maximum. And the minimum, still again, because we're pushing higher overall frame rate, the minimum barely improved, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I was talking about with an FPS cap. And when I recommend FPS caps, I usually say stick to your average FPS to try to keep it as high as possible, but going under your average FPS can still further improve the minimums if they aren't close together. So for example, if I cap it at 80 and my minimum was still down at 55, capping it to 75 or 70 might bring the minimum up to 60. Because you're leaving more headroom, resources for the GPU, the memory subsystem, the CPU in the tank, for when something intensive comes up, it can divert those resources to maintain a high frame rate. So I'm not going to cap it that low, because obviously, you know, a lot of people, you don't want to miss out on your higher refresh rate of your monitor, even if it's just, you know, 20 FPS above 60 for 80 FPS as an average on 1440p Ultra. You can still benefit, you know, from having that. So anyway, what I'll do is I'll try capping it first though at 90, not even 80, but 90, so it's below the maximum but above the average, and we're going to see if we get any kind of performance improvement, or if just the minimum stabilizes a bit more, seeing as we're not going to be maxing out 118 all the time. Alrighty? So I'm going to do exactly the same run. So this is 80, 118, 52, and then we're going to cap the FPS to 90. So you'll see me cap it like, I think the game menu has an internal cap of 100. But anyway, I'm going to cap that now to 90. So you can see it on 90 there on my on the left, on my OSD. And just recheck the settings, 1440p Ultra, DXR disabled, FSR ultra quality, and we're just going to retest and compare it. There's a storm going on right now. I hope the car doesn't cut out. Alrighty, so that was interesting. We can see that it still tanked at the very end, and capping at 90 did not make a significant improvement. If we look at the previous run, capping at 90 actually hurt the overall. Well, frames rendered is a given, because if you have higher max, you're going to have higher frames rendered. That's just normal. But looking at the average and the max, it didn't really do much. We actually went down on average, and one lower on the minimum. So maybe that wasn't enough, and I'm going to try doing what I showed you earlier. Is if I go to, let's see, Far Cry 6, and we'll cap it to 75, and our goal is to improve the minimums from 51, 52 to see if the FPS cap that I talked about does make that difference. I do believe we're going to have to tweak in-game settings to stop that tank at the end, because it is view distance and streaming bandwidth related. So if you lower certain settings to do with view distance and geometry, etc., texture quality, your bandwidth won't need to be as high. So this is more for GDDR6X cards that dip at the end, and yeah, I'll show you what it does. But anyway, so we're trying to beat about 51, 52 as the minimum by capping the FPS to 75. We're going to see what happens. So we're just going to do the exact same run again. And this is more like a sign, like maybe Far Cry 6 has a different thing with it. Could have, it could be a problem with the game engine itself or the benchmark where it just dips at certain spots and it's optimization related or benchmark related. Some benchmarks are known to be buggy. But we will see. If it goes off my theory where your maximums hit your minimums, depending on what your averages are, then we should see an improvement on minimums for sure. But again, we just have to wait for this test to play out and see what it does. Because it might still dip to 55 at the very end, which brings the overall minimum down. But from the looks of it, look at that minimum. It is holding a higher number because the max isn't so high. So the average before, well, the average isn't so high, I should say, as well. But the average before was 77 to 80, and now it's only 73 with the 75 cap. But we'll see if that minimum maintains or if it dips all the way down. It could even just be recording the lowest minimum, which is kind of lame because it's always going to be around 55 because of that end scene where the camera lifts and shows the part of the island, this part. So if it still dips down to 54 and shows us 54, then it's a benchmark issue. It's not showing the average minimum, it's showing the lowest minimum. So, we should be looking at this part of the graph rather than this last part, which is all we're seeing here at the 52. We're only seeing that as on the minimum. It's showing us the lowest, not the average. So if I go look at this other average with 80, we're at 80. So this is the previous when I capped it to 80, all right? When I capped it to 80, or I capped it to 90, sorry, we only hit the 90 barrier 2 times, and we averaged, 77 FPS, and it dipped down as low as about 65 here, and maybe 68, 69 here, around this spot. Like, just looking at their weird graph thing. Now, if we look at the 75 FPS cap, you can actually see how much more stable it was having it at 75. So while here, we dipped below 70 here. So below 70 and almost around 65, 66 here, right? Here's that dip to 65-ish, 66, maybe it was 64. But then the other dip at the second part, it actually looks very similar, but overall more consistent is what you want. You don't want it to be going from 90 or here, 90 down to 77 and then down to, that's where you feel jerkiness and input latency doesn't feel smooth because it keeps changing. And when you're hovering around a better, like that, it feels better. But again, this still isn't optimal because we can see that there are obvious dips in the benchmark, built into the benchmark with ultra quality settings on this GPU and CPU configuration with my 3600 megahertz RAM, which is around 58 NS after tuning. So what I do now to try to smooth it out further, this isn't really my intention as a video, but I'm also going to show you how I smooth out my games to make them feel good and also for good real life recordings. So I'll go back now because I've given you guys the VRAM usage, the data that you might want. except I didn't turn off the HD texture pack because it's not stuttering everywhere. You know, it seems fine, and we'll do gameplay to double check that. But looking at the differences when I was enabling and disabling it off camera, it's worth to keep on if you can. If you can, you know, if you have a 12 gig VRAM GPU like the 6700 XT, it doesn't make sense not to use it as long as your settings are right. Okay? So, going back in here, we're going to go back to my native monitor resolution because this will show up best on, you know, when I do the recording, it'll be in 4K. Okay, so back to native. So look crisper, you can spot the differences better. And then I'm going to try to get that smooth frame rate that I was talking about. And like I said, the benchmark has some hitches in it. Well, not hitches, but the dips in the benchmark are related to running ultra settings. And you do not need ultra settings for good visual quality. You can actually lower a few settings and you'll barely notice it. So this is probably one of the more controversial ones because volumetric fog normally has a large FPS hit. In Far Cry 6, it does not have a massive hit. It is optimized. There is a gain going down to high. But as you can see, the fog itself gets lower quality. And so ideally, we actually want to keep ultra fog. This is one of the first games where you'd want to keep ultra fog. Because you can just see how bad it gets. It just gets more and more pixelated looking and abnormal. It looks like freaking chemtrails or something. So we'll keep it on ultra. This is where you get the better streaming quality, is just turning some settings down that can hit your frame rate but have very little image quality difference. So, you know, you don't even have to lower them far. Just ultra down to high. Environment is a lighting. It changes the immediate lighting vicinity. We can probably leave that on ultra, and this is view distance, but at the same time, you don't actually notice this when you're actually playing. Like, it changes how the overall scene looks, but you don't notice it that badly when it all looks the same. You know what I mean? Like, you can notice it in a side-by-side, but you don't notice it in gameplay. And then shadows is just a subtle grass difference. Like, it's not actually that huge. It's going down to medium that shows the larger difference in the foreground, and yeah, you won't really notice that. It looks like it's a bit sunnier on the grass in the far distance, but yeah, you don't notice that. And then leave everything else how it is. And terrain is kind of the texture quality streaming distance as well. It can help with hitches, and I don't know. We could turn it all down to high, see if you see a big difference on anything. Except we'll just leave geometry and vegetation's view distance. We'll leave that one on ultra, and we'll just turn every other setting down to high, because that keeps it simple, except texture filtering. So we want maximum texture view distance, maximum texture filtering, and good volumetric fog. And then the water actually has an FPS hit even when water isn't on screen. That might even be enough to improve, because there is water in the benchmark, to bring up those dips. And leave everything else as it is. Ultra quality FSR. And this is at 3440 by 1440, where I wasn't I was still getting that big dip at the end, so we'll see what happens now. And we've capped it to 75. I don't think I need a 75 cap. I'm on a 100 Hz monitor, so I'm going to cap it to 90, which is still fairly high. But the idea is to try to smooth out the overall, you know, the benchmark. And then we'll see how it runs in-game. So what I pay attention to is, rather than the minimum, because we know that's just the lowest minimum in the overall benchmark as a whole, we look at the 1% and the 0.1% low on the left, on the Afterburner OSD. And that 1% low is more what I'm, you know, concerned about. We ideally want to keep it above 60 with this 90 FPS cap. And if it doesn't stay above 60, it means that it's not stable for that smoothness. But it is holding. It's holding 65, and we'll see if the view distance dips again, down to 55. 57? Not as bad. Actually, that was better than the 1440p run, because I lowered the presets. But as you can see here, there's still those two dips. Now, this previous one here was 1440p with ultra graphics quality, and we were capping it with a 75 cap. We got average 71, minimum 52. And with a 90 cap, we got average 82, minimum 57. You got better minimums, and that was mainly because of the tweaking. Obviously, if I'd kept it on 1440p, we would have hit higher minimums too because of the preset changes. But we'll see if we can alleviate this dip here and this one. We can kind of smooth them out further, if possible. And the only way we can see left to do that now, short of going down to medium settings on anything, is by just lowering that streaming bandwidth with the view distance. So now it's not going to stream as much because it doesn't have to do as far on the camera. And terrain was already on high, I left it on high. So geometry and vegetation was basically view distance and for grass and plants and stuff. But when you're on the ground, like you can see it in this angle here, but when you're actually on the ground, you don't notice that as much. So maybe that'll be enough, and we'll just try it. Otherwise, capping a bit lower might also help. But, you know, I'm mainly showing this, even though it's for my specific resolution, you know, 3440 by 1440 with this card and CPU, I'm also showing what I'm doing here just because you can apply the same method to whatever settings, whatever card or monitor you're running. You might be running a weaker card and you're just trying to take a look at RX 6700 XT benchmarks. You could still go back and tweak your settings, cap your FPS, and end up with overall smoother performance than what you had before, just using the same method. So that's why I'm also trying to explain it a little bit. Because I do this for all my games, like if you see gaming videos where I'll randomly turn an FPS cap on, it's because I've tested that FPS cap to be more stable than 100. We'll just see how this goes. The 1% is improved, fairly sure, but the in-game reading is just annoying because it shows a big dip no matter what at the very end, and that's what it shows as the overall minimum, instead of giving us an average of the whole benchmark. But look at that. That time, with the texture, like, you know how I said I think it's texture streaming related? That time we didn't dip down under 60. We stayed above 60 because I turned environmental, like basically the draw distance setting, I turned it down one notch to reduce the bandwidth requirement. So as you can see here, we dipped under 60 on the previous run, and I only changed the environment, the geometry and foliage setting. So we stayed above 60 that time. Although these dips are sharper because we were holding up at 90 more, or they were larger. 70. No, we stayed above 70. It just looks that way because the graph is kind of condensed. Now that we're not dipping as low. That's weird. So here we went from 83 or 84 down to 71, let's just say. And then on this dip, we went from 80... See, we were at a higher average, actually. The way that the graph is... It's just weird. The graph kind of zooms it automatically, like it zooms itself in, so it looks like we're getting bigger dips. We're not getting bigger dips. So 71, maybe 73 or 74 is what this looks like. And then we actually started off at 70 for some reason. And then here we started off at 80. So it changed the entire scope of the graph's dips. So if I rerun that, we'll probably actually get a smoother overall. But what I want to do now is, because I wouldn't want to go lower than these settings. And like under high is like, why would you run such a high-end setup and then not get the best, you know, visual quality possible while, like, you know, maintaining a good balance of optimal settings. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to try capping it to 85 and see what that does. Just as one more run. So we've established that the geometry and vegetation does contribute to that hit at the end because it is view distance related. It affects view distance. But I've capped the FPS a little bit lower, and we're just going to see what the benchmark looks like. Still got that dip, you can see it. You can see the dip. But look at the consistency, it's improving. It's slowly improving from capping lower and lower. The dip is not as big because we're not dropping from 90, we're dropping from 85, so it lessens the dip, I can say. And that's where if you're playing single player and you're not like run and gun action 144 hertz necessary, like we're not playing against other players, you might find that playing at 80 FPS capped or even 75 FPS capped, when that consistency is better, the game just feels better overall. So here we go. About the same actually. But we started off high. It didn't dip as low at the very start, but the start's glitchy. I mean, the start even lets you control the camera for a few seconds before the benchmark actually starts running. And I believe that's why it's kind of like not consistent when you start off the benchmark run. But that dip is hard to get rid of. The only way we could get rid of this consistently is to cap it at literally 70. And then you'd never dip because you're at you're at the minimum for this section of the benchmark. And we're staying above 60 still. So what I'm going to do is just to show you how consistent, like if you're interested, like I know there's some people interested in this, if you want console-like, because you know consoles are at 60 FPS anyway, and no one complains, you know, it's just a given if you're on console, but we are at 3440 by 4040, which is a noticeable visual benefit compared to a lot of consoles. But if you want console-like consistency in your input latency, when you move the mouse, when you move the camera, you don't want it changing because of the frame rate not being consistent. I'm just going to show you now what that might look like. So we'll keep it on Ultra, but DXR is going to stay off, and Ultra Quality FSR. And then what I'm going to do is, because of those dips, and this is specifically related to the benchmark, in-game, you actually never get dips like that. It's way more consistent in-game. But I'm going to cap it to 70. And we're going to see what that graph looks like for a 70 FPS cap run. Okay, we did get a bigger dip there. Like, we still got the same dip, and that was because of the streaming system. So, basically, by putting the presets back to 70, not back to 70, back to Ultra, we get bigger dips. Because of that, I don't know, that weird stream. I guess it's the way it's streaming in assets. And that would mainly be related just to view distance, that one. And maybe shadows, because shadows are always hitting the overall performance, and water hits performance even when you're not using water. Environment, terrain can probably all stay the same. Terrain is kind of like texture quality, but it's not. It's separate, like, it's weird. But anyway, we'll just try, that's the main one I feel. It's the memory subsystem. And then we'll try one more time. We'll see if those dips alleviate. Because we know we can hit 70 in that area. Some people will be sick of this by now, like I just keep restarting it. Oh. Okay, so 70 average. Still a little dip there, but look how small it was. There's a tiny dip here and a tiny dip there. I think it's just related to the way the game's streaming textures in it. It does it at that point as you're loading into the town, and then it's done. Like it's fairly stable after it.
It is strongly urged that you respect these safety measures established by your government.
Like, see how much more consistent that is. See about the dip at the end. Right down 63. That's all. Nice. So yeah, as you can see, we were able to get it much smoother than before, but this is related to the actual benchmark. We need to actually play the game to show you what it's like in-game, but that's how consistent you can get it with a bit of tweaking, and obviously I could get it even smoother than that if I want to adjust certain settings down closer to what the console might actually run. So I do believe there is optimization related performance hit here from the benchmark. It's just to do with the way the benchmark's optimized as well. But if I lower these settings, just all down to high, because, you know, even that's not that noticeable, but I do want to leave volumetric on Ultra, but we'll just try that. And as a last resort, we can try lowering the HD texture pack, because HD textures, even though they do improve the appearance of text and signs in the game, when you're actually shooting, you don't notice it as much. But HD textures do have a large hit on the memory subsystem that I was talking about with streaming in data. So if you're streaming in larger textures, you need more bandwidth. And so simply disabling that might also fix those drops, because we're not running a GDDR6X 3080 or something like that. So we'll do that last. We'll try, we'll do a texture pack on and off and all, see how bad the dips are. But right now, I'm just trying to see if I can smooth out the 70 FPS performance to get it close to a console. So around here, there's another dip coming up. There it is. It dipped to 64. So we can see the 64 minimum. That's the largest dip. Okay? And all we got to do now is see if it's really the memory subsystem getting overloaded with like a large texture, some large buildings, whatever's loading in that part of the benchmark, streaming in. All I got to do is turn the texture pack off and leave everything else as it was. And you can see the 1 gig estimate, but clearly we were hitting way higher in the actual benchmark. If you were paying attention, it goes up to like 10, 11 gig. But leaving it off, and I believe it reserves for the texture streaming. It's not actually using 11 gig actual like files loaded into the VRAM, but it reserves a portion for the texture streaming system, and it needs a large reserve for the HD textures. So when I disable this, we should see a noticeable drop, and it might even smooth out that dip that we're seeing. And if it does, then that might be a worthwhile trade-off for anyone experiencing, FPS drops. We'll see. This is with 70 FPS cap though, but I'm mainly exploring that dip we were seeing at the very start. We'll see if it is better or not. So, off this road, 64 was our previous minimum. It's the same. Okay, so in terms of optimal settings and that dip, it is built into the benchmark. That's all I can say. You can improve it. Obviously, with 64 is higher than what we were first getting at full ultra, so you can improve it by lowering settings and lowering the overall, load on the GPU and the CPU. But you can't completely eliminate it. So it's just the way the game engine is streaming in. But still, I mean, the consistency is way better at 70 FPS. Just if you're on even like 100 Hz monitor like me, I don't want to miss out on any performance just because the benchmark is a bit wonky. So I would still keep a lot of ultra settings. Oops. And mainly just the water because you don't notice it. Environment actually is nice to have on ultra, and draw distance is nice to have on ultra. But shadows you also don't really notice, even though you can see it in the little back and forward here. You don't actually notice that minor grass shadowing. We can leave it on ultra for testing purposes. So I'm going to leave all that on, and FSR is going to be on, and we're going to cap it higher this time. I've got to put it back to 90 because I'm on 100 Hz. If I uncap it, we're lucky to get 100 spikes over 100 as a max. For 3440 by 1440, it's just not worthwhile because then you get tearing on a 100 Hz monitor. But at least you get some relative. I will uncap it and cap it during gameplay so you can actually see if it's making a difference to have a cap or not. But the main difference for me is just the consistency and the temperatures overall by not pushing into the maximums whenever you look at the sky or something. So yeah, we'll keep it at 90, but I'm going to uncap it for the actual testing, initial testing, so you guys can just see what that's like. And we'll probably finish this benchmarking run at around an hour. Righty. Okay, my kid's game actually. So here. And we're gonna go into, I was playing on story with my kids, and it's just so easy. We will try going in gorilla mode, just to see if I get destroyed or not by the AI. Righty. Now, I don't want spoilers, because this isn't a playthrough yet. I'm still doing a benchmark test, so I'm gonna, do a separate video for that. We're going to try to skip the spoilers, and this is just more so you can see how the game's running out of the box, like out of the gate, with these settings.
Precisamente. Exactly what Castillo wants.
Enough politics, Lita.
You think the draft is only taking through Yarans? It's the outcasts, the
We kinda
poor,
fucked up.
orphans like us. He's slavery back from the dead. In Yara! You can't run from this.
Hang on. You ditched us. Ran off to the jungle with a bunch of guerrillas.
Libertad.
Now you're back here to recruit for Clara Garcia's local crusade? Come on, this is our big goodbye. Danny, fucking say something. They got my name wrong.
Danny, you could help Libertad. You're trained.
Would have been career military if you weren't such a fuck-up. Just come with us, Lita.
You never fucking listen, Danny.
Hey, time to go. Boat's waiting. Drinks in Mexico. Dinner in Miami.
Why does this guy sound like Rico from Just
Fucking
Cause 4?
blackout.
Too big for a
Just Cause.
blackout.
You fucking package? Oh yeah. What's going on?
Draftees must report for duty. You will join us to rebuild paradise.
What the fuck?
Draftees must report for duty.
Yeah, this is the cutscene, but even here, we're getting averages and 1% at 78. If I cap that to 90,
Must report for
Alejo,
duty.
get down.
You will join us to rebuild paradise.
the 1% goes. Oh no, it's still dipping because of the scene swaps. Keeps changing the camera direction.
Danny.
But we get a little bit of power savings, lower temperature.
Now.
The boat.
Must report
You're coming.
And back to uncap.
Lita.
paradise.
See. Come on, Danny.
But it's not really a good place to test here. I'll need to get past the intro. I should have had a save ready. Sorry, guys.
Draftees must report for duty. You will join us to rebuild paradise. Draftees must report for duty. You will rebuild paradise.
Not letting me move. I think it's like a cutscene.
Yara's future is in good hands. For if I am a president,
What's going on there? I couldn't even move. Maybe because I've been pressing the relive buttons too much.
Draftees must report for duty.
Stay close, Lita.
There we go.
Okay, Danny.
When we get to
Okay,
Miami.
so you can see here, I'll reset the benchmark, and just watch the FPS. See how dipping 64 on the 1%. Okay, 55, and we're at 100 or 97 on the average. And then if I reset the benchmark just here in this spot in the stairwell, maybe just here, we can see that it goes again to 0.1% at 54 FPS. Okay, and 1% are at 86. And now I'm going to cap it to 90. And the 0.1s are, let's see, if I look up there, okay, looking up there, thanks to, I'm just going to see if it does it again. Yeah, looking up and down from here, the open sky to the stairwell, thanks to the 0.1 to 46 FPS. And then uncap, see if it thanks that, it's the same. So that's uncapped. So it's just the scene does it. Maybe over here we'll see again if there's any difference with the FPS cap or not. So looking here, I'll just do this camera shake test, because that way I'm not changing the scene direction too much, which might be optimization related. Just looking here where the fog is and the two soldiers, if I shake the camera a bit, like we're going to shoot or aim at them, we are at 86 on the 1% pulse. That's actually really darn good. Capped or uncapped doesn't matter. And if I cap it, it's probably not going to make much of an improvement. If anything, it lowered it actually. But the soldiers are walking away, so. Fire from Syndicate again. Nope. 81 on 0.1%. It didn't actually help. The only thing it helped with was temperature. We actually had a fairly good temperature drop from that. So yeah, uncapped is actually better for 0.1s here. But if you're not too fussed about having 80 plus as your 0.1, just look at the temperature. 68 degrees on the hotspot, 69 degrees, and 100% utilization. When you cap it, it actually drops down a good 3 or 4 degrees, down to 65. And that's on the junction, the higher temperature. So, you know, just from a single player perspective alone, you want to save a bit of power. The power consumption is also, like, if I just stay still for a bit, 152 watts capped, and then uncapped, 167 watts. So, you know, you can save a little bit of power too. But not a big deal because the game is capping it at 100 for some weird reason. Maybe I missed the setting that caps the frame rate somewhere. Did I? Oh. Maybe it's an internal cap. I don't know. I haven't capped anything. Can I do that? No, it didn't help. Like, I frame rate locked it to 144 because it's capping at 100. I don't have FreeSync or anything enabled. Oh, there we go. It's just what the game wants to run at. It only hits around 100. I thought it was capping. It only hits around 100 there. So it's not, like, obviously I don't want to have it capped if I can avoid it. The in-game caps are not really very good. But it only wanted to hit around 100 here. 166 watts. Oh, it means I killed in one hit on Guerrilla mode. But I think it could just be the scene. Alrighty. Now, rather than playing through this, because this is not a playthrough, I'm just going to go to open world. I've got my kids loaded. I can load up. How do I select save game? Okay. So their story. They've just gotten into the open world scenes. We can just have a quick look. Oh, but it's nighttime, darn it. So you can see here with the trees and everything in open world, 75 on the 1%. Okay, 75. And then if I tap it, 80. So if oh no, when I zoom out, obviously it changes it. I have to hold it. Okay, I'm staying zoomed in, so I'm aiming at an enemy, you know, kind of thing. That's not an enemy. 81 with the 90 FPS cap, without changing the zoom too much. 78 with the guy coming closer to me. Oh, that's ruining it. Go away. So just zoomed in here, we're getting the foliage and the view distance and, you know, shadows and everything. So 45 0.1, I think it's gonna have the dips because see there's AI coming in. But 1% low is 74. Okay, and then if I uncap it, 1% lows 80. Which actually is better uncapped. The game engine seems to like having it uncapped. I don't know. Maybe it's a resource allocation is smoother this way, or it's just the fact that there's stuff happening. Like AI could have been lowering the FPS, and yet they can't get a consistent test because the AI is dynamic. The way that stuff randomly comes into your screen. So I have to go further away from the AI. Maybe there's this field of
Shit. Don't get too close.
like over here where there's less stuff happening. Okay? So uncapped here at the beach. Oh, are you serious? Is there some what the heck? So okay. Uncapped. 88 FPS, 1%, 79, and then 48 on the 0.1. And then capped 83 and 82. But again, the 0.1 could just be from AI. There was even a dude walking on the friggin' beach. It's definitely not an empty game. No matter where I go, there's something happening. So that affects the... But I mean, if we just try to play a bit and burn some trees or something, 58 we're dropping to, with whatever's in the scene, and then if I uncap it, 82. So yeah, it's traded places. It's hard to really say. That's almost down. Now try looking back to the island here. So 84, 67, 0.1%. And this is uncapped. And then tapping it. 83. Can we get the 0.1 to go under 64? No. It is a little bit more stable. And then I'll see if I can get it to go. It dropped to 64 when I was doing this type of test. And now it's holding higher again with uncapped. So it's not making too much difference to FPS cap. Maybe because I've got it too high, like I've got it capped at 90, so if I capped it, you know, at 70 or something. But again, I want to try to maintain a higher frame rate. And as you can tell with the visual quality, it looks great. Those coyotes? Wait. Get it.
Get him.
So weird. It ran away. These are aquatic dogs. You can see. You can breathe underwater. Wait, I'll try to get it, but it stays still. See if I can hit it with one of my guns or something.
Guapo, complete.
I got it. What is with the crabs now? Yeah, that's probably part of why I can't get consistent results with the FPS cap testing. Who cares? We're just gonna look at the average because that is more consistent overall. And the average is, you know, 81, 90, 100. It's moving around the instantaneous reading, but just look at the average now. 103, 106. And it keeps moving, basically. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that it's not staying at 100 or 102, it's moving all few FPS variants. And then if I tap it, how stable does it hold 90? 1 FPS down. Yeah, it is definitely more stable on the average. So not the instantaneous reading, but the reading above it, this average here, is definitely holding more stably. It's not going up and down as frequently. That means that the overall FPS is more stable. And you can also look at the graph. Like, the graph is more of a straight line rather than having as many dips in it. And if I uncap it again, you can see that the graph gets more rough. So that's a more simple way to put it, because we cannot get a really consistent background with all the AI and random crabs walking on the screen and stuff. I can't get it to be smooth. Just run around a bit. I wish it was daytime though. I can't change the time of the day, but without playing the missions. But the game does look pretty good. Oh, what was that? Was that some texture? Yeah, let's pop in. That's annoying. Can I... Was one of my settings affected? Did I lower the setting? No, I kept it on ultra. I only lowered water. Wait, can I actually do that? That'll help. I'm just gonna lower a bunch of stuff because I was running something like this on my kids playthrough because I found it looked smoother. And we'll see if it... I still does it, but if this changes the distance it does it at. With all those... But there's a certain amount of pop-in that you just can't get rid of because it's got a maximum, you know. Look at that light though. That's unrealistic. I think the light came from the environment. Or it could just be a clean thing. Oh, that's better. It's not doing it now. But yeah, like I said, when you're actually playing, you don't notice the vegetation moving as much, or anything really. Most of the graphical changes from the settings. When you're actually focusing on the story, you're looking at like I'm trying to go to the diamond, for example. You have to actually stop and be staring at plants to really get affected by it. Fast travel. Oh, there is fast travel. Nice. Maybe if I go here, it'll into daytime. Nope. Must be a mission-based time of day or something. How do I wait? Is there a wait? Bottoms. It's built. But it's going to give me a power up. But yeah, anyway, this is the performance and the VRAM usage. Request.
Guerrillero! What can you tell me?
You want to hit the military where it hurts? There's an anti-aircraft site on Santuario. Blow it up.
Gracias.
Yeah, look at that. 0.1, wait, innovation again. So look for forces and AI around here. 32 is running around back here, back and forward here. And I'm going to cap it to 90. We'll see if it still drops to 32. There's AI and stuff, right? 47. So, still dropped, but not as quickly. So when I reset the cap, and then I'm going to uncap it again. See if it still goes back down to the 30s. I think it was just from having both forces on the screen at the same time, I don't know. No, now it's fine. Oh, it's just game engine related, I don't know. Little anomalies. I guess this game runs fairly fine, uncapped or capped. There are games that definitely do run better with an FPS cap, but I guess it's not that CPU heavy. Looking at the CPU utilization, it is using, you know, half the cores, but the overall utilization 34 to 50, depending on which way I'm facing. It just seems to do more to do with the AI on the screen. We need some combat to really test it. I'll have to do a proper playthrough benchmark. Some gameplay benchmark rather than just
Let's go.
checking the FPS caps and stuff. Oh, what the heck, why did he turn towards me, you asshole? Why would you do that? What the heck did he do that for? My horse? Okay, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.
I gotta take this.
Get out of here! Move!
Holy shit!
me out of here. Gracias.
You got it. Should kill the alarm. Bet this place has a stash room. Juan, the checkpoint is clear.
Didn't that feel good? You've earned some guerrilla karma today. Keep it up, Danny.
Okay, go.
Good there. Put that down.
¡Moving!
Any last words? ¡He disparado!
They're distracted! Go! Go!
Gonna grab a ride.
Here's your ride. Ignore that scratch. Wasn't me. You have to walk, guapo. Switch phones. For the dust, let me get another order of shots. But we want it so they might go to cops. Tell them they all need to get on my. I put a pepper in the friend and I feel fantastic. You can tell my liver be.
Fucking truck!
Permíteme. Hola.
Et voilà.
Well, hello there. Watch it.
Ay, Dios. Ay, Dios.
Go! Go!
Good crock.
Check that out, now! What? Who's firing? ¿Qué? ¡Disparar a la llanta! ¡Dame cobertura! ¡No, Chad, traidor! ¡Shit!
Boy, sorry. Official libertad business.
What the hell?
You can't come in this ride, amigo.
You want us to